Last week, 2 out of my 3 children started in new school environments, and one of their concerns was about making new friends. So we as a family had a discussion about choosing and making friends. And that got me thinking about why it is so important for teens, and for all people of any age for that matter, to make friends and to have friends. It's because we don't want to be lonely or to be left out. We want to be included in a group, and we want to mean something to someone. Even the most introverted person knows they need some sort of social interaction and have a friend. No one wants to be alone, and no one wants to feel lonely. I don't know if you ever felt a true loneliness, a deep sense of despair that you are alone and you are so far away from your home or your comfort zone. You can feel lonely even in a room full of people. Having developed to be an extrovert and a people person, I rarely feel truly alone. But I remember feeling true loneliness when I spent my first Christmas here, away from my home in Texas in 2002 as a visiting pastor here, without any family. Even though there were lots of people around surrounding me and I was invited to lots of Christmas parties, I felt a deep loneliness that was hard to describe. I was new to the Grace community, away from family, away from my childhood friends, and I was on the other side of the world. That Christmas, I would have given anything to be home celebrating the holidays with my friends and family. However, as the years went by, I grew to love it here in the Philippines as I got to know more people and gained friends and family, and even raised a family here, and that terrible feeling went away. There are lots of lonely people out there looking for a friend. Perhaps there are many in the congregation this morning. They're looking for a community, a companion. They're looking for relationships that are deep and meaningful. They want to matter to someone, and they want to be included and accepted. At some point in our lives, almost everyone will feel some sort of loneliness, whether as a youth, as you're going off to camp for the first time, or when as an adult you are moving away for work, or your children now live far away. Or perhaps as an older adult, you've lost your spouse of many decades. In those times, you will feel lonely, and in those times, a friend coming alongside of you is just what you need. I remember Chuck Swindoll telling the story of seeing an ad in a Kansas City newspaper. It read, "I will listen to you talk for 30 minutes without commenting for $5. Swindoll said, "Sounds like a hoax, doesn't it?" But the person was serious. Did anybody call? You bet. It wasn't long before this individual receiving 10 to 20 calls a day. The pain of loneliness was so sharp that some are willing to try anything for half an hour of companionship. Now, what does the Bible say about friendships and loneliness in the context of having friends? Let's take a look. If you have your Bibles, I'd like you to turn with me to the book of Ecclesiastes as we look at chapter 4 and study verses 4 to 16. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 4 to 16. Now, as you're turning to this passage, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this book, the book of Ecclesiastes is a book of wisdom literature written by King Solomon to his descendants to warn them about the pitfalls in his life that he had experienced so that they would avoid falling into the same pitfalls. And more importantly, to have them understand that living a life apart from God is utterly meaningless. From this passage, we want to extrapolate 3 biblical principles about friendship to combat loneliness. And as we study this passage, it will seem that perhaps King Solomon was going through a period in his life where he was lonely and just in need of a true friend. He could have been in the midst of waiting on the Lord for something and felt alone, or had lost someone special. As king, for sure there would be many people around him all the time, but he probably had very few true friends, or perhaps they were only his friends because he was king and wanted or needed something from him. So as he assessed his life, he wanted to teach his children and his descendants about loneliness and the value of a true friend. And because this book is written, inspired by God, it is also applicable for us as well. I read now Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 4 to 6. Again, I saw that for all toil and every skillful work, a man is envied by his neighbor. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. The fool folds his hands and consumes his own flesh. Better a handful with quietness than both hands full together with toil and grasping for the wind. Now, I know that wisdom literature can be hard to understand at times, so let's unpack this. In verse 4, Solomon looked at the daily grind of mankind and observed that everyone was looking out for his own good. And although he was generalizing that everyone's work and everyone's achievement is envied by someone else, Solomon's point was that as he observed life, he realized that people are envious about others on practically everything on all social levels. People compared practically everything. And therefore, his point in mentioning this observation is that at the end of the day, because of our sinful human nature, as we keep comparing with others, then everyone is living this life looking out for themselves and living life for themselves, whether they admit it or not. Everyone is intrinsically selfish, and their motivation is oftentimes because of envy. And therefore, there are some people in the world who are only your friends because of what they can get from you. They see you as an opportunity to advance in life. In verse 5, Solomon notes that a fool doesn't care about the daily grind of life, but that is an exception, and he's still a fool. And in verse 6, it describes the middle ground between the two preceding extremes in the battle of life, one of indifference and the other being cutthroat to win. Solomon's advice was that contentment is the best way to live life in view of the simple needs of life, so that you don't get caught up in the comparison game and the battle to win in life. Because when one enjoys the simple things in life in contentment, then they will experience peace and quiet, a life without too much drama. This drama-less life is in contrast to the drama-filled life accompanied by anxiousness and struggle as depicted by having both hands full. Solomon was saying, it's not worth it getting caught up in the rat race, the daily grind, the striving and the battle to be on top. And yet so many don't understand this truth. So they live lives only for themselves, because the only way to get to the top is to make sure you take advantage of others and use them and step on them to get on top. Well, there is a consequence to this toxic perspective and vicious action, which Solomon spells out in verses 7 and 8. Take a look. Then I returned, and I saw vanity under the sun. There is one alone, without companion. He has neither son nor brother. Yet there is no end to all his labors, nor is his eye satisfied with riches. But he never asks, for whom do I toil and deprive myself of good? This also is vanity and a grave misfortune. The sad consequences of a person who uses others only to get ahead in life is that he will have no friends. He or she is alone and without companionship. His relationship with others were transactional, only to get something for his advancement. And when he finally stopped to look around, he realized he was alone. Solomon describes this person as having no son or brother, meaning no family members are even around him. Perhaps he had pushed his own family members away or severed the closest of relationship in his pursuit of self-achievement or personal ministry. But this person doesn't realize it. He or she keeps working, stepping over everyone, ignoring or severing relationships, mowing down those who get in the way just to achieve a goal. In the second part of verse 8, we read that this person is never satisfied with his riches. He never stops to ask why in the world he is doing what he's doing, destroying relationships and alienating friendships for the sake of achievement. But sadly, at the end, Solomon notes, such a driven person will wake up and realize that his striving to be on top, to be recognized, was futile or meaningless, because he could not enjoy the things that he had worked so hard for, nor could he share it with others, for he is alone. It's like a father who has little time for his wife and children and his family, deluding himself into thinking that he is working so hard for them. But at the end, he loses them or is absent in their formative years because he, in reality, is so devoted to his work. And he will soon regret it, as no one can reverse time. As has been said countless times, but often never taken to heart, no one ever said at his deathbed, "I wished I'd worked more." In those times, people wished they'd invested more into relationships. And putting it all together, we have our first biblical principle in this passage on friendship. Number one, people who live for themselves end up alone. People who live for themselves end up alone. Therefore, develop quality relationships. My friends, work on developing quality relationships both with God and with others. If people are only a means to a desired outcome for your life, then you will end up alone and lonely. This applies even for people who are in Christian ministries, in school, or in church work. Look at your life. Who are your friends? Do you have a close relationship with members of your own family? Will they still be your friends and come to your rescue when you are no longer working with them or they no longer need you? Do you have family members whom you know for certain will come to your help in time of need? If you don't have people like this, then perhaps the problem is you. You have lived only for yourself, and your relationships are transactional. And if this is you, it is time for you to develop quality relationships regardless of your temperament. This is biblical advice from our Lord to help us live this life well. Remember, people who live for themselves end up alone. Don't be alone at the end of life. The second biblical principle about friendship to combat loneliness is found in verses 9 to 12. In these verses, Solomon will talk about the value of having true and quality friends. There are 4 advantages he will mention. Look at verse 9. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their labor. This verse speaks about the general principle that when it comes to doing something, it's better to have more people doing it than only having one person. It isn't hard to see that when you have 2 workers, they will get more things done and will accomplish more than when you only have 1 worker. This is the first advantage of having friends. You can get more things done in life. Now you may be thinking, but Pastor, I hate group projects. If I did it by myself, I could have done it faster than to waste time with people who aren't as good as me. But this is a general principle, not looking at just one group project, but over the course of a lifetime. One simply has to admit that more is better. Just look at the church now. There is no way that one pastor can do everything. That's why we have a wonderful staff team. But the size of our ministry staff team is still too small for the number of people in our church community. So we have to depend on hundreds of volunteers to help us. Now, one person could conceivably try to do everything, but the work would be very low quality, inefficient, and simply unsustainable. This notion that if you want to have it done right, do it yourself, may work for one project or in the short term, but it is not sustainable in the long run. That's why it's been proven in the corporate world that teamwork leads to better results. 20 years ago, when the church pastoral staff team was only 3 people, not only did I have to preach almost every Sunday and prepare a new sermon, I also had to handle the youth ministry, the pastoral care ministry, the worship and music coordination, and even had to do admin work like designing the weekly bulletin. I enjoyed it, I never complained, but it became readily apparent that I couldn't do it all myself, especially with a young family. Not only because I didn't have the time and energy, but because there were so many talented people who could do it better. That's when we began to build a staff team. Now, of course, with more people on the staff, There will always be more personnel and personal issues. But there is no denying the value of a team and how it far outweighs the problems more people bring. In the same way, because we are imperfect people, there will never be any perfect friendships. But having friends and the time it requires to cultivate those friendships is worth it than trying to do things and live by yourself. That's why throughout the scriptures, we see God asking each one of us to work together, not alone, to advance the kingdom work of God. My friends, Christianity is to be lived out in community. Now, the next two advantages of having friends is in the context of Solomon observing two people traveling together on a journey. Look at verse 10. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion, but woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. In this verse, we see a situation where two are traveling together and one of the companions fall. The other will naturally help him up. But it would be so terrible if someone was walking alone and he fell and hurt himself badly. There would be no one to help him as he called for help. You see, the second advantage of friendships is that there is help in time of difficulty. There is help in time of difficulty. Can you imagine walking alone and then falling into a ditch or a hole where you can't get up out by yourself and no one hears your cry for help? That's probably one of the most terrible ways to die. A few years ago, I was biking and I went airborne trying to avoid a truck that had swerved in front of me, as many of you know, and I landed on my back and broke 3 ribs. I was glad I wasn't biking alone, but with a group. When it happened, my fellow biker friends protected me from the oncoming traffic, helped me up, pick up my things that were scattered all over the road, and called someone to eventually take me to the hospital. I can only imagine if I was biking myself, how much more difficult it would have been. How wonderful it is to have friends who can help you in your time of difficulties. But if this applies to our physical falls, how much more does it apply to those times when we stumble in our spiritual walk and need help and restoration? Galatians chapter 6, verses 1 and 2 says this. Galatians 6, 1 and 2. Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Carry each other's burden, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. How grateful we should be for Christian friends who will help us walk straight in a righteous and godly manner, especially in times of difficulty. Look back again, Ecclesiastes chapter 4. I read now verse 11. Again, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? In this verse, we see that there are two traveling companions, and they're resting for the evening, but they are exposed to the elements. To keep warm, they lie close together. If you don't know, it gets very cold in Israel at nights, especially in the Judean hills. You can literally die in the cold. But if there are two or more people, perhaps the shared body warmth together would allow them to survive. If the traveler was alone and caught in the elements, how could he or she find that extra warmth? The idea, of course, is that there's comfort in time of need. And this is the third advantage of friendships, to have comfort in time of need. Comfort in time of need. In life, we all need comfort and encouragement from others. The peril of isolation is that you can emotionally die inside without the encouragement and comforting words of others. When you feel insecure, unsure of yourself, when you have doubts, a friend can come alongside, and his words or her words can bring comfort to you in your time of need. During my time in the U.S., where I was invited to speak at a church, I asked the pastor about the demographics of that church, and in particular, about the demographics of one service. The pastor told me in that one service, there were lots of young people, especially high schoolers. Somehow, when I heard that, I suddenly became very insecure, wondering, how can I connect to American high schoolers? I already feel so old with my teenage children making me feel very old because they tell me I am old and that my ways are cringe. Anyway, unlike the Asian culture, which tends to be more forgiving, this is a blunt American culture I'm dealing with. Well, after preaching the message, I came down and sat down as the service ended. There were two high schoolers who were seated behind me. One shook my hand, the other gave me a fist bump. One of them said, "Great message, Pastor. I didn't sleep. Hope you can come back." Then the other said, "Yes, can you come back next Sunday?" I was on cloud 9. I quickly put in our family group chat, "American teenagers think your dad is cool." We all have emotional and spiritual needs, and friends provide that encouragement and comfort just when we need it to pick us up. Look at verse 12. "Though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken." In this third travel scenario, Solomon says that if a thief or someone were to attack one of the travelers, the other can come to the rescue. And a 2 versus 1 scenario would allow them to overcome the attacker. But if one was traveling alone, it would be very easy to attack him. You see, the fourth advantage of friendship is that there is protection in time of danger. Protection in time of danger. When you are in danger, friends will come to your rescue. When you are in need of help, they will rally around to your cause. Do you have friends who will come to your aid, who will protect you in time of danger? One of the best definitions of friendship is this: a friend is the one who comes in when the whole world has gone out. A friend is the one who comes in when the whole world has gone out. You will know who your true friends are when they come to your help to protect you and guard you from danger. Solomon then stated climatically that if 2 are better than 1, verse 9, then 3 are even better, verse 12. Friendship should not be confined to merely 2 people, but the more the better. It was the idea of 3 cords that were woven together like a braid. And as we know, a braided weave is stronger than any one strand alone. What a beautiful picture of friendship. Yes, friends will let you down at times. No one is perfect. So don't expect perfect friendships. They may disappoint you and even tell you things you don't want to hear by pointing out your blind spots. But because of them, you can accomplish more in life. They help in time of difficulty, they comfort in time of need, and they protect in time of danger. Then therefore it is worth pursuing and cultivating deep friendships. So go out and make a friend or be a friend. And putting it all together, this is our second biblical principle on the value of friendship in this passage. There are no perfect friendships, but the value of friends outweighs the negative aspects. The value of friends outweighs the negative aspects. Let me encourage you, my friends, that in the Christian life, you cannot live in isolation. You must make the effort to make friends and be in communal life. God has wired and designed each one of us to work better and enjoy life more fully in a group, regardless if you are an introvert or antisocial. I like how someone put it: I went out to find a friend, but could not find one there. I went out to be a friend, and friends were everywhere. I went out to find a friend, but could not find one there. I went out to be a friend, and friends were everywhere. My friends, don't wait idly by and say, "No one wants to be my friend. No one likes me in this church." Stick out your hands after church and say, "Hi, my name is so-and-so, and yours is?" And you can do it while you're waiting in line for your coffee or after church, while you're waiting outside the classrooms to pick up your children. Now, you don't have to be the best of friends with the first person you meet, and you don't have to find your lifelong friends in the first life group of which you are part. But as you get to know people and see the value of befriending others, you will find a natural group of friends that you can do life with. The success of the Toy Story franchise is because it centers on the genuine friendship between Woody and Buzz, if you know those characters. In fact, the theme song for these movie franchises titled "You've Got a Friend in Me," which won writer Randy Newman an Oscar. You know the words, "You've got a friend in me. When the road looks rough ahead and you're miles and miles from your nice warm bed, just remember what your old pal said, boy, you've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. You've got troubles? I've got him too. There isn't anything I wouldn't do for you. We stick together, we can see it through, because you've got a friend in me." Yeah, you've got a friend in me. If only that was the attitude of every single Christian believer. That they would go out into the world to be that friend, to reflect Christ to a friendless world that is looking for friends. I hope you will understand that we are crafted and created to be in community. No one is to live in isolation. Now, verses 13 to 16 give us our third biblical principle about friendship to combat loneliness. And to illustrate this principle, Solomon will share a story of a king and a young man. Look with me as I read verse 13. "Better a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who will be admonished no more. For he comes out of prison to be king, although he was born poor in his kingdom. I saw all the living who walk under the sun. They were with the second youth who stands in his place. There was no end of all the people over whom he was made king. Yet those who came afterward will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and grasping for the wind." Now let's explain this. The king in the story had at one time heeded his counselor's advice and ruled wisely. But then something happened. He got old and he refused to listen to his advisors. He was probably surrounded by a collection of yes people who only flattered him and only told him what he wanted to hear. They isolated him from reality, and they were able to take advantage of this situation to get what they wanted. And this is a warning. This often happens to those who are older or weak leaders of any age, where they do not want to listen to constructive criticism, they do not listen to others, and they cannot take criticism. That's why these leaders, or these type of leaders, often do not have true friends who speak the truth, because they push them away, and they only surround themselves with fake friends who will only tell them what they want to hear. Now there's a hero in the story, a wise youth who is in prison. From his lowly position, he's able to somehow rise up to great prominence and become king. He gains great popularity among the people, as verse 15 tells us. Everyone cheers on this underdog and rejoices that the nation had at last the wise leadership it was looking for, unlike the old king who wouldn't listen. It looked like he had it made, as verse 16 said. There was no end to his popularity. He also had great authority. However, his popularity, prestige, and authority was short-lived, because the next generation were not pleased with the successor king. Apparently, the younger generation who grew up under this new king that rose to prominence from a lowly position with a very compelling life story, they now rejected him. We don't know why. Perhaps the new king became like the king that preceded him and only listened now to yes people. Whatever the case, it seemed the new generation despised and disposed of this king and appointed someone else. Now, what is this story telling us? This story teaches the truth of the fickleness of popularity, and applicationally shows us that popularity does not determine true friendship. Popularity does not determine true friendship. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 13 states that it is better to be poor and without influence than to be powerful and influential. Why? Because power, influence, and prestige are all transitory, and power corrupts. Better to have a few friends than to be popular, surrounded by many friends who are not true and loyal and won't tell you the truth. It was reported that Howard Hughes, who was then worth approximately $4 billion, said, "I'd give it all up, all of my wealth, for one good friend." You see, the third biblical principle on friendship is this, number 3. Better to have true friends than many friends. Better to have true friends than many friends. Look at the people you call friends and honestly assess if they will stand by you when you need them. Will they stick around if you need help? How many of them will accompany you to the hospital? How many of them will vouch for your character in a trial? Or perhaps they're only your friends because they need you or you need them. If one day you don't have any more power or influence, would they still be your friends? If you're depressed, lonely, or have a medical condition, will they be willing to spend hours with you every day for months and years to journey with you through your tough times? Better to have true friends than to have many friends who are not very true. Friends who will leave you when the going gets tough are not true friends. True friends are those who come in when the whole world has gone out. On the second leg of my multi-country journey, my family was able to join me in Shanghai. Of course, after preaching on Sunday, they wanted to go to Shanghai Disney, the last of the Disney parks we had never been to. But it was very hot and humid in Shanghai, as it is in the middle of July. And we had read and seen through the app that lines were up to 3 hours long on the most popular rides and attractions. 3 hours for a 60-second ride didn't sound worth it. Now, I have many friends around the world, but none of them could make it so that we didn't have to wait in line. However, I found out that I had one pastor friend who knew an executive at Disney who liked to bless certain people by offering his Club 33 tickets, which included free admission and front-of-the-line fast passes to most all the rides and attractions. And when this one friend knew that our family was interested to visit Shanghai Disney, he offered us those free tickets, which we gratefully accepted. It was wonderful not having to wait in any lines for anything, especially in the hot Shanghai summer weather. You see, it doesn't matter if I have many friends. What was most important is I have the one right friend. Better to have one true friend than many fake friends. And in case you are wondering, no, my friends, my friend cannot be your friend if you want to go to Shanghai Disney. Anyway, in light of these 3 biblical principles on friendships that we study in the passage, which are that people who live for themselves end up alone, and the value of friends outweigh the negative aspects, and better to have true friends than many friends, perhaps you and I really do need to sit down and reassess the friends and family we have in our lives to make sure we not only look for and cultivate true friendships, but that we also check our motives for why we are a friend to others so that we will not end up alone. The Bible is very practical. Having said all of this, there is one friendship that you and I need to cultivate first and foremost, and that is our friendship with Jesus. Jesus wanted so badly to be our friend that he died on the cross for our sins, so that friendship with God was made possible. He is there to help us accomplish great things in life. He is there to help us in our time of difficulty, to comfort us in our time of need, and to protect us when we are in danger. No truer friend is Jesus, for he will never abandon us when we are alone, and he will even carry us when we can't walk another step. In fact, Jesus tells us in John chapter 10, verse 10, "I've come that you may have life, and that you may have it more abundantly." How is that not a great friend to cling to and to cultivate a deep friendship? He lovingly seeks us out when we do not deserve his friendship. So why don't we just accept his friendship and enjoy a deep relationship with him? I guarantee you, you will not regret it. There is no truer friend than Jesus, who demonstrated his commitment to us when he gave up his life for us. Jesus should be one of our closest friends, if not our best friend, for he has sacrificed the most for us. May we all assess the people we call friends in our life.